Hello and welcome to Forbest Academy. We will be completing an English literature lesson today. The short story we will look at is The Fly by Katherine Mansfield. Our vocabulary for this lesson is as follows. Reminisce, disturbing, disturb, inherit, courageous, brave, joyous, ordeal, protagonist, antagonist, catalytic character, and climax. We will first begin with the elements of the short story and then discuss the plot of the short story. The elements give us important information that we need to know. The plot is a summary of what the story is about. The Fly was written in 1922. Katherine Mansfield wrote the story after dealing with the loss of her own brother in World War I. The author speaks of the difficulty that war brings, both during war times and also after the war has ended. We learn that families are impacted for years. The setting of the story is in the boss's London office. The protagonist of the story is the boss, an unnamed character that is struggling with the loss of his son. A protagonist is the main character of the story. The antagonist in the story is war and death. An antagonist is seen as the villain of the story. Sometimes authors will use situations like war as antagonists, or even concepts like death. Death sometimes plays a character in stories. Death and war are not real people, yet we make them real and give them human-like characteristics. Do you know what we call it when we give a non-human, human-like characteristics? We call it personification. You can remember this word because it has the word person in it. The story was written in a third-person point of view. We as the readers watch the story unfold. We are unable to tell what the boss or a character named Mr. Woodyfield are thinking. We see the events unfold in front of us. As we are watching the events, Mr. Woodyfield says something to the boss that makes him upset or uneasy. Mr. Woodyfield is what we call the catalytic character. He brings the story to a boiling point, so to say, where the boss needs to face his grief and misery. The climax of the story then follows, where the fly is killed and the boss experiences terrible pain that frightens him. The climax of a story is very intense and exciting. The climax is a very important part of the story. We are left to wonder if the boss has dealt with his pain and can be at peace with the loss of his son. The short story begins with two elderly men, the boss and Mr. Woodyfield, sitting in the boss's office in London. The two men are reminiscing about times gone by. The word reminisce means to enjoy a recollection of past memories. We learn that Mr. Woodyfield is a retired employee of the boss. He stopped working when he had a stroke and now enjoys weekly visits to the boss's office. The boss is a large, wealthy man that is 5 years older than Mr. Woodyfield. He has aged very well and is proud of his office and what he has accomplished. The boss pities Mr. Woodyfield, as he sees him as old, frail, and forgetful. Because of this, Woodyfield is controlled by his wife and daughter, who only allow him to leave the house on a Thursday. Like most weekly visits, the boss brags about his furnishings with a forgetful Woodyfield, and Woodyfield admires the youthfulness of the boss. As Woodyfield is talking, he forgets what he is trying to say, and to cheer him up, the boss pours them a whiskey. Woodyfield then remembers what he was trying to say, and tells the boss that his wife and daughter went to Belgium to visit the grave of his son, Reggie, who had died years ago in World War I. Woodyfield seems to be at peace with his own son's resting place. He speaks very highly of the graveyard, flower beds, and walkway. Then Woodyfield mentions that the girls had seen the boss's son's grave. This is very disturbing for the boss, as he built his entire company for his son in the hopes that his son would take over the family business. We could say that he was going to inherit the family business. The word disturbing means to cause anxiety or worry. To inherit means to receive when the previous owner has passed on or died. Woodfield then leaves, and the boss locks himself in his office and tells the office administration to not disturb him for the next 30 minutes. The word disturb means to not bother or interrupt. The boss does not want to be disturbed because he plans to weep for the loss of his son. The boss, however, is unable to weep. To weep means to cry. The boss is unable to cry, and this tells us that he has not dealt with the loss of his son. He is not at peace. At this point, the boss is distracted by the fly falling into an ink pot. The fly struggles in the ink, and we witness or watch the boss take the fly out of the ink. We think that the boss is trying to help the fly. The boss watches the fly. He thinks that the fly is courageous and brave. Courageous and brave are synonyms. These words mean to face unpleasant situations without showing fear. The boss is joyous when he sees the fly succeed, meaning that he is happy or delighted. The boss then does something unexpected, something that we did not think he would do. The boss puts more ink onto the fly. He does this to see what will happen next, if the fly will continue to fight to live. The fly then begins to clean himself off again, but this time more slowly. The fly is tired from this ordeal. Ordeal means a painful or bad experience. The boss watches him anxiously, hoping that he will succeed. Again, the boss decides that he will add another drop of ink onto the fly. The fly cannot clean himself any longer, and at this point, we see the fly die. This reminds us of the death of the boss's son. Please watch the video on symbolism to learn more about what the fly means in this story. The boss then picks up the fly and throws him away. He feels very bad and calls in Macy to ask for blotting paper. At this point, the boss forgets that he was thinking about the death of his son. The boss shows us that he too is aging and is forgetful. Now that we have had a look at the summary of the short story, we will look at our vocabulary again. Some of the new vocabulary that we learned in this section includes reminisce, disturbing, disturb, inherit, courageous, brave, joyous, ordeal, protagonist, antagonist, catalytic character, climax. Now try to see if you can provide a definition for these words and use them in a sentence. Thank you for listening to this recording and subscribe to this channel to watch more videos like this one.